Hi everyone, and thanks for stopping by as I talk about movies. And today I'm going to complete a 3-video series on a recent Criterion box set release, and this is titled The Renowned Westerns. 5 films directed by Bud Boetticher and starring Randolph Scott, one of the great Western stars of all time. And in this third disc, there's 2 films, Ride Lonesome and Comanche Station, the 2 films I'm going to talk about today. And Ride Lonesome, which was released in 1959. Both of these films were released in 59. And we have Randolph Scott getting kind of old. I think he's 60 years old here. And we have the chief villain. Is he the villain or not the villain? Played beautifully by Pernell Roberts. Now, Ride Lonesome is a return to Lone Pines. This is a return to great outdoors. Buchanan Rides Alone, Decision at Sundown. The 2 previous films on this set were basically filmed in towns, in western sets in Arizona and California. But now we're back to Lone Pine, and it's astonishing, fantastic, incredible landscapes, and we also we're getting CinemaScope here, so we're getting the widescreen version of Lone Pines, and let me tell you, in Dolby Vision, they look magnificent. It's also a return to the screenwriter Burt Kennedy, who had written The Tall T. He did not have the credit on Decision at Sundown or Buchanan Rides Alone, but from the interviews that we get in the supplements, we gathered that Burt Kennedy was called in at the last minute and was on set, and they were actually creating new scenes as they went along, as Boetticher was not satisfied with that screenplay. So Kennedy brings a great deal of humor, and when he became a director, he basically directed humorous westerns like Support Your Local Sheriff. Now this is a story about a bounty hunter who is, in the opening sequence of the film, in Lone Pine, the crazy rock formations of Lone Pine, comes across a young man who he has been tailing and trying to capture, we have the typical Boetticher standoff, but he's able to bring him back. But he knows, this bounty hunter played by Randolph Scott knows that this outlaw's brother will be arriving to try to gain his escape before Randolph Scott is able to bring him to town and bring him to justice and get his reward. Along the way, as happens in these films, Scott runs into another bounty hunter and his sidekick, who want to join up and claim the bounty themselves. There is an amnesty clause to this bounty, and they're wanted men, and they want to go straight. And so this is the character played by Pernell Roberts, and he is sort of a likable villain, and we really don't know what his motivations are. It's always ambiguous, and there's a moral conflict here, because there is a sense of relation. They've known each other, or Scott and Pernell Roberts' character have known each other in the past, and but they need each other because they know that the brother is coming to save his younger brother. At least for a while, they're going to need each other. Now, this film has very much, and it's not mentioned in the supplements. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere, where this film is basically a remake of The Naked Spur, which was an Anthony Mann Western from about 1953, an A Western. This is a B Western, and so we get Pernell Roberts is playing the Ralph Meeker part, Randolph Scott playing the Jimmy Stewart part. James Best playing the Robert Ryan part from The Naked Spur, and Karen Steele playing the Janet Leigh character. It's basically the same movie, and it's interesting to compare the two because this is a B movie. This is a B movie made in 2 weeks with a very low budget. To Anthony Mann's A movie with superstar Jimmy Stewart and big star Robert Ryan, and Janet Leigh was a big star then, Ralph Meeker on his way up to stardom. And it's interesting to compare the two. Of course, you can't compare these small budgets to these much larger budgets that Anthony Mann was working for. But it is interesting in the landscape, the use of landscape here that Bedecker uses to frame his characters in a kind of desolate area. They're always riding through areas that can change from scene to scene. And they're always very compelling in their look. In Anthony Mann's westerns, the landscape is forbidding. It is a sort of a manifestation of the psychological torment that his characters are going through. He is a great director of landscapes as well as Bedecker, but from a different angle, and from the psychological sort of Freudian depths that are reached in the Naked, especially in The Naked Spur, where the landscapes itself have to be constantly conquered. So we get, again, as in all of these films, we get some great early performances from actors that mostly became very noticeable television actors. Pernell Roberts, for instance, a couple of years later would star in Bonanza, one of the most popular westerns on TV ever. This is the first film for his sidekick in this film, James Coburn. He's real skinny. He has some good scenes. In fact, Randolph Scott noticed how good he was, and he mentioned to Bedecker, "Why don't you and Bert write another couple scenes for Coburn, because he's really good." And then we get an early appearance from Lee Van Cleef. He is actually going to be the villain of the piece, but we don't get to see him until almost 2/3 of the way through the film. He had worked with Bedecker, I think, in some earlier films, not in the renowned series. James Best plays the Robert Ryan character from The Naked Spur, and of course he's much younger, but he has this sort of irascible sense of humor and irony that he shares with the Robert Ryan character from The Naked Spur. James Best again becomes a very well-known, popular television actor and guest starring in many series. Roscoe in The Dukes of Hazzard, probably the movie is the role is going to be best remembered for. Karen Steele is here. She was also in Decision at Sundown. She was involved in a tempestuous relationship with Bud Bedecker at the time. She has a very good role here, and I thought she did really well. I mean, she does again look like the typical 1950s model with her long platinum blonde hair and makeup. But she acquits herself very well here in many of these scenes. There's also a really satisfying conclusion here. We have standoffs, and then more standoffs, and then more standoffs, and the final one is very satisfying, I think. And I also have to mention Charles Lawton Jr.'s cinematography. It's just fantastic. Lawton is not as famous as, say, Lucien Ballard, who was Bedecker's favorite cinematographer, but Lawton has some great credits, including A Lady from Shanghai. And there is a commentary by Jeremy Arnold, his film historian. It's very good, well worth listening to. On the Blu-ray, you get the introductions. So we get an introduction for Ride Lonesome from Martin Scorsese. But again, as all these introductions, which are only included on the Blu-ray, so if you're watching the 4K, you're probably going to watch the film first anyways, but don't watch these introductions first, because even Scorsese's introductions just tell the whole plot of the story along with clips from the movie. So the next film, and the last in the renowned cycle, is Comanche Station. And this again is outdoors. In fact, I don't think there's any interior scene at all in this film. And here we have another opening with Randolph Scott wandering through Lone Pines scenery. We don't know what he wants to do. The first 10 minutes of this movie is almost dialogue-free. He's quickly found by Indians. We assume he's a trader because he rolls out a bunch of goods. They take him to the Indian camp. It's a very disturbing movie because we think he's going to be killed at any moment. Of course, he's Randolph Scott. He's not going to be killed. But that doesn't mitigate the tension here. And what he seems to be doing is he is trading his goods, which he adds a rifle that the Indians really want, in order to gain the freedom of a woman who had been taken captive. And he successfully makes this trade. But there's other Indians around, and there's lots of danger on their trip to Lordsburg, where this woman has a husband who wasn't out looking for her. But we find out there's a $5,000 reward. So that attracts Claude Akins. And so in the fighting of Indians, they get involved together. So we have this lone hero, again, with the somewhat shady characters coming to the rescue and then having to join forces in order to get through Indian country and back to Lordsburg. There's going to be standoffs. we can see them coming, so this is played by Claude Akins, another great TV actor. He was in very many movies. Inherit the Wind. He plays the Bible-thumping preacher in Inherit the Wind, but so many great television roles. Skip Holmeyer returns from The Tall T. Richard Rust, very good part here. And we get Nancy Gates. Nancy Gates was a sort of minor actress. I don't know that she was in some A movies. In fact, she plays Arthur Kennedy's secretary. If you've ever seen one of my favorite 50s melodramas, Some Came Running. And she is the captive who Randolph Scott trades for and frees. But her relationship, as in all these films, the woman's relationship to the men is always are showdowns in themselves. They're sort of dialogue duels. She doesn't trust Randolph Scott, but then she finally learns who to trust as these standoff conversations develop with Claude Akins. So the movie is basically riding across landscapes. The Comanche Station is a way station on the stagecoach line. There's lots of horses there. The depot master has been killed. He wants them, before dying, he says, "Save my horses." So there's mules and horses and four riders that are actually 5 riders in the beginning, who we see going through all the various landscapes around Lone Pine and the surrounding areas, which is never-endingly fascinating. You might, at one quibble of the movie, you might say, there's a whole lot of watching the horses going through these different landscapes. That is beautiful, especially as far as the horses go, because Bud Bedecker was a great horseman, loved horses. And the action sequences are very well staged. And there's quite a few of them here. And we come to a very satisfying, another satisfying conclusion. I think Bedecker was really good because we never know what to expect in his final showdowns. This was a good one, as the rocks of Lone Pine seem to almost cover up the characters. We have to see them in between all these rocks. And what are they going to do? Now, there is a commentary here by Taylor Hackford, film director, And there is a supplement here where Hackford interviewed Bud Bedecker in 1971 when Hackford was working for a television station. So he's a longtime friend, and that shows in this commentary because everything is great. And it's a very worshipful commentary, not just about Bud Bedecker, but about Burt Kennedy. Every line is fantastic. Every shot is fantastic. So it's you can really pass this by because any useful information that comes out of it, you can, if you listen to the supplements, which are pretty extensive. There's many supplements here, and a lot of the information overlaps each other. Now the Taylor Hackford interview with Bedecker in '71 is pretty fascinating because it's shot at his ranch and in Southern California, and Bedecker gets to show his bullfighting prowess and his horsemanship, and it really is a fascinating piece. There's no introduction to Comanche Station. Instead, they have a Super 8 condensed version of Comanche Station that came out I don't know what year it came out, but I remember these 8mm condensed versions of movies. I own quite a few of them myself at one time. It was too tough to watch because the quality of it, was just terrible. But if you're interested in the historical artifact and how they did these condensed versions, it's probably worth checking out. And the book, we have a really nice booklet, a very long essay by Tom Gunn that covers the whole career of Bud Bedecker, and then a shorter essay by Glenn Kenny, the Outlaw Variations. And boy, this is really good. Here's Richard Boone from the Tall T, and Claude Akins from Comanche Station. And who else do we get here? I thought I saw it. Here's Karen Steele from Ride Lonesome. So this is a really good set. And what's my assessment? It's hard for me I'm not much of ranking films. It's hard for me to do, but I would say that the two favorite films of mine here is The Tall T and Ride Lonesome. I think these, if I had to give an assessment, I would say these are probably the two best B-movie westerns I've ever seen. In fact, not just B-movie westerns, but B-movies made in the late 40s, early 50s, or throughout the 50s. When B-movies was a big thing. And in fact, Bedecker's career, after Comanche Station, he would make The Rise and Fall of Legs Diamond, and then he would go on some sort of insane adventure in Mexico. And when he came back, there was no B-movies anymore. He wrote the original screenplay for Two Mules for Sister Sarah and had hoped to direct it himself. This was a Clint Eastwood movie, but then he was at odds with the studio heads, and he never really got a chance to make a real A movie. He did make another Western with Audie Murphy after he came back, but the rest of the time he worked on screenplays, and he was an active man in the film community in Southern California. What's amazing about, and let's get to Randolph Scott's future, because this is the last of the renown. He was basically retired. Peckinpah cajoled him out of retirement to make one more movie, Ride the High Country. He was in his mid-60s by this time, and along with Joel McCrea, which is a great send-off to both of those great movie actors and great stars of Westerns. I do want to close with a comment or a quote from Andrew Sarris's American Cinema book that praised Bud Bedecker very highly. And there was once a tribute to Andrew Sarris, and Bud Bedecker participated in that tribute, and credits Andrew Sarris for reinventing his career. And what Sarris had said in his book was that Bedeker's westerns are constructed partly as allegorical odysseys, partly as floating poker games where every character took turns at bluffing about his hand until the final showdown. I think that's a really accurate overview of what these movies are about. And let me say, you know, for any Western fan, of course, this is going to be a must. But Bedeker, in my early days, I much preferred Anthony Mann. I much preferred John Ford Westerns, Howard Hawks Westerns, especially Rio Bravo, which came out in, I think, the same year as these final two films. But given what Bedeker had to work with, these low budgets, they made these films in 2 weeks. It's almost amazing when you see how could they possibly have filmed this in 2 weeks. He knew how to work fast. He knew what he wanted. And, and as far as his career goes, the arc was there. Randall Scott, Burt Kennedy, Lone Pine, great cinematography. So all in all, Bedeker has certainly risen in my estimation. I really, and especially in Dolby Vision, these films look absolutely astonishing in Dolby Vision. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.